I feel like this needs to be like sponsored by Juicy Juice.
Oh my gosh. How amazing would that be?
The Juicy Juice variety show. Done. We're producing it.
Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast. Okay, welcome to the first edition of Beyond the Lens. This, I guess you could consider our pilot of sorts, because this is going to be very rough, as this is the first show, but we'll give it a shot anyway. For the first few shows, we'll have our favorite different TV shows that we had as a kid, and mine, which is today's topic, is Zoom. I guess, how familiar are you guys with the show?
I mean, I used to watch, I believe it was on PBS. Yeah, I used to watch PBS.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. I used to watch PBS all the time as a kid, and I would occasionally see like advertisements for it, but I would never actually watch it. And I'm not really sure why, but it always seemed entertaining to me. Mm-hmm. I just never actually gave it a try.
I think it's the same with me, as I saw it kind of in passing, but it was never something that I immediately... I think my focus really was on like one of three shows at a time in my life. And then once like one of those three shows ended or something happened, I move on to another show. And like three was my max cap. So apparently that just did not make it into my 3-show run. But, you know, going back and watching a clip of the show today, just to kind of refresh my memory, I do recognize the theme song. I was talking to a couple of my roommates about it, and they started singing it, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing that other people definitely know about.
Yeah.
I just wasn't as familiar with it.
Yeah, that theme song is so catchy. I think most people actually know it, even if they haven't seen the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one thing that you guys might not know is that the very first version of Zoom actually aired all the way back in the 1970s.
Yeah, I saw that. I did a little research, and I thought that was pretty cool that they kind of did a reboot, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these, like, I guess I'd consider it somewhat of a variety show. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure what I would, because of the various segments in it.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's nice to see that those types of shows can continue to be revitalized and refreshed every so often. I mean, you see it with stuff like game shows all the time. If the concept stands and it works, there's ways to modernize it and refresh it for a new audience. So what kind of things were on the show? Because I know it was filled with various segments. It looked like there was some science stuff involved, because it was sponsored by like the National... What was it? The National Science Foundation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and I thought it was really cool that they did a segment for like fan mail and everything. I thought that little segment itself was kind of appreciative of the people who, you know, make the show possible. Some
of the various segments that come to mind when I think of Zoom is the games, the crafts, the recipes, the science experiments, and they even had plays.
Which one was your favorite, Rico?
Of the segments?
Yeah.
That's tough. I'd say it would either have to be the science experiment or the plays. Because I like storytelling and I'm very creative. Then at the same time, I also like science. And, well, I can't exactly credit the show for my love of science. It definitely played a part in it.
That's really cool.
I think it's interesting that there were several books released based on this series, with Zoom do's you can do, kind of referencing the different activities that they did on the show and showing that these are the activities that you can do at home with you and your family and friends. That's something that we really don't see too much of in children's television nowadays. That was kind of the ending cups, because the show ended in like the early 2000s, and you don't really see many more television shows that have that cross marketing of interactivity. You have TV shows that have, books that they're based on, or they adapt one of the television stories to a book, or you have merchandising like toys based on the series, but you don't really have much like Mr. Rogers or anything with Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. They have very interactive materials to be able to bring families together, and that just really isn't a thing anymore. So I find it interesting that this was like that ending cusp of that fad.
Yeah, and I was going to say there just isn't really a show that's like Zoom anymore. Like, it just cuts between segments and it flows really nicely. I think that's something we're missing in children's media nowadays.
I completely agree.
I think the closest we've gotten to anything like this show is something like, and as far as children's television goes, is like The Amanda Show, or
I was going to say The Amanda Show,
like
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love The Amanda Show.
But even with those were more for an entertainment and comedic standpoint versus this, which, yes, there was some comedic and entertainment value to it, but there was also a lot of educational and interactive segments to it to be able to balance that out.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for a children's television show to have that some sort of level of education, in order to teach the kids why the things that they're doing is fun, but also like what the process is behind it. I just got into a discussion recently about theme park entertainment and attractions, and it's kind of the same thing. Was, you look at a theme park like Epcot, which was set up as a very technologically advanced and educational entity. It's kind of lost its identity, and it's shifted completely away from what that is. And you see that a lot with the fads of children's television, just television in general. It goes through all these cycles of different things that, and it circles back. You see it in media in general. We had, we continue to loop through an Alice in Wonderland phase, or a Wizard of Oz phase, or a Peter Pan phase, and we just keep coming back, and all the studios will focus in on that one segmented thing. So I think it'll be interesting to see if we ever do get a show like this to come back to broadcast television, and if not, what is, streaming services like Netflix or Amazon Prime or anything, Hulu, will be able to pick up and play with this idea.
Yeah, I just find it kind of funny because, Zoom was essentially a reboot, and people are talking about rebooting it again because there's the same problem of there isn't a show like this anymore. And I'm kind of interested to see if it's actually possible to reboot Zoom, and if it did happen, what would it look like?
I mean, the closest thing I would consider sort of a reboot of Zoom sort of happened like right after Zoom was canceled. The same producers of the show went and created another show for PBS. I don't know if you heard of it. Fetch with Ruff Ruffman.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. I didn't actually watch it, though.
Same. It was another, I've heard of the show, but never actually physically watched it.
It was sort of similar to Zoom in that it had, real kids doing these educational activities, and there was a science curriculum in there as well. But, again, some of the things that were missing, because it sort of took a new spin with the animated characters, Ruff Ruffman, and him hosting this reality game show and all this stuff. But it was missing, at least from Zoom, in my opinion, was, one, the idea of a viewer submissions, like how you could with Zoom. You could write to Zoom, you could send in your ideas. And also the interactive element that you were talking about earlier, you see all these kids in Fetch do all these great activities, these great challenges, but there's not really anything like that shows that you can essentially do something, even if it's on a smaller scale, yourself at home with your family and things like that.
I think it's also interesting to see, going through some of these clips, how simple a lot of the, well, one, a lot of the activities were, but two, the backgrounds and everything, they have such broad color pops, but you can also tell that it's like on a studio stage. So I find that very interesting because there's not a whole lot to distract people from what's actually happening. Going back to what you were saying about like viewer submissions, I'm honestly surprised that that is not a thing that happens more often in a lot of these shows. And I know that was a huge thing in the 90s, but you see how people act on social media and how they just want their opinion thrown out there, or look at me, let me get my 15 seconds of fame. And so to not have that accessibility in a lot of these television shows anymore, it's very bizarre, especially with how opinionated and, center of attention-y everyone is.
Yeah, now that you point that out, I can see that now, and it's sad.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to play devil's advocate for a second and be like a studio executive who hears something like that and says, well, all these kids are now on social medias nowadays, like Facebook and Instagram. They're on these sort of platforms already, so why would we want to bring sort of that element back into a children's show when it's the 21st century and people can easily do that themselves without the need of a TV show to do it?
Well, I think just saying my segment was chosen for a television series is enough to get people to go crazy and brag about it. And by bragging, I mean share that episode or that clip of that episode on social media and then get people higher viewership for that show. So that's the starting point. And then, if that's going to give you more viewership and merchandise sales and anything like that, ad space, wherever it's going to be, why wouldn't you take that? Social media is a free tool. Implement that or because it's been, 10, 12, 15, something odd years since the show ended. So much has happened with social media since then. YouTube was just starting up when this show ended, so there's a whole Facebook wasn't even around, so there was a lot that's been happening since then. So maybe there's a way to implement a social media aspect on the show, like use your hashtags to send in your, post these things on social media and we'll feature them on the show or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was thinking when I said, oh, I wonder how much the show would change or what would change. There would definitely be a lot more segments involving social media and just people having different ways of sending things in, like videos, everything from videos to a short clip to pictures. Like, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah.
I think with something like this, where a show has so many various segments to it, it would have to kind of shift and refocus on maybe focusing on a specific topic and maybe like 3 or 4 of those segments for each episode, so that we didn't like overload people. But then again, you have social media, which is overloading people and everyone's attention span is shot. So maybe those like 10 segments an episode might work better now. God only knows.
Yeah, there you go.
I miss a lot of these hands-on activity things. You don't really see any of this anymore. Bill Nye the Science Guy is another one that did a lot of these types of things.
Oh, yeah.
You don't see any of this anymore. Any of the explanations behind how anything works.
No, yeah. And I like the thing about Zoom, like where they, zipped from segment to segment, or like I saw the first episode entirely, actually, just to get a sense of what Zoom was like. And they zipped from the starting segment and then cut to another segment, then went back to that first segment. And at first I was like, oh, okay. I thought the first segment was done. But then I was like, oh, it kind of makes more sense to take a break because then it leaves you with kind of a cliffhanger as to, oh, how did that segment end? And I thought that was really engaging. Even though there was no explanation, you kind of had an idea of like what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that definitely fits the attention span and the format of how things are working now with children's television. So I don't know, maybe not a whole lot would need to change, just modernizations and updates and tweaking.
Exactly.
And a new cast of kids, because these kids are going to be way too old now.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you guys know this, but as sort of a side note, I know you had mentioned that you've seen the first episode or whatever.
Yes.
The Zoomer Jared, who's in the first season, he unfortunately passed away in 2006 in a drunken driving accident.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that would have made him, what, like, definitely less than 20.
Yeah, I think so. Like late teens, early 20s.
I'm thinking it was like early 20s.
Yeah, still that's such a young age. And yeah, I mean, I have nothing to say other than that's really unfortunate. Because it's like you grow up watching this show and you see someone you kind of like idolize or look up to, and to hear that, you know, they died at such a young age, it kind of breaks your heart.
Yeah. And another thing that you mentioned, like getting new kids, like if you were to modernize it, I know like from season to season, they got new kids. They usually had like, they didn't, I don't think they did this in the 70s, but I think they just did this to help ease the transition with this generation, is they kept some kids from the past season, and then they brought in new kids, and then as they grew older, so it just kept changing.
So they kind of transitioned like Barney did.
I think I'm not entirely familiar with how the kids on Barney work, because I mean, I watched that as a kid, but I didn't pay that much attention to the kids.
Ironically, I paid way too much attention to that show. Yeah, what they would do is they started out with a set of kids, some of the older kids that started with the series back in the late 80s, and then as they progressed and got older each season, they kind of started to trickle in like new kids and watch to kind of have them grow up with everyone. So they just continue to transition new kids in and the older ones out and cycle it out, and then they replace everyone, and then the show got terrible. You know, as television does.
Yeah,
so I feel like
yeah.
this show, I think, I mean, it ran for 7 seasons, so it definitely got its run out of television. With what do we have in here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 16, 200 episodes. Like that's crazy for a kids' television show, and especially in that 7
for a
years.
reboot.
Yeah. Because the 72 series had that one also had 6. So that one had 6 seasons. This one. It doesn't say how many episodes.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
Oh, right here, 130 episodes for the first
crazy.
Part of the run. Which, and then being able to reboot that 20 years later and have more than that, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I think it just goes to show that like that format just works and it keeps kids' attention.
It keeps them engaged too, and it doesn't have to. Not every single thing has to be on the phone. You know, you have all these different apps and these color by numbers and the Bejeweled and all these different games that people and the kids play. While yes, they're helping build your brain and doing all that kind of stuff and moving it forward and giving you like brain teasers, there's so much more that you can do with physical items too. And I think this show did a good job of showing some of these like home crafty things.
Yeah, that's something we're missing a lot of. Like, we have kids who stay on their phones all day or play video games all day, watch TV all day, and they're not staying away from the screen. And Zoom showed that, you can do crafts, you can cook, you can do all this other stuff besides stare at a TV screen all day. And I think that's also something we're missing from a lot of children's media nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I'm always impressed when a TV series is strong enough and brave enough to say, yes, we are a TV series and we are telling you, please do not watch TV all the time. I think that's incredible. I mean, it shows how strong and confident they are in their message. And it obviously worked. It ran for 200 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely amazing.
Do you know if any of these kids went on to do anything after they were done with this show? Like, did any of them become famous actors or anything?
I don't think so. I mean, the closest I could think of is that Caroline, who just so happened to be the Zoom that was also on the most seasons of any of the kids. She went on to be the host of a science YouTube channel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, that also makes sense from what she did with Zoom.
True.
I know Emily from the last season, she sort of was an actor as well in different commercials and stuff. But nowadays, I think she's sort of, well, she does have a social media presence. It's sort of toned down a little bit since she first emerged, I guess. And the only other one that I can think of, at least as it relates to showbiz, I could be wrong on this, but I've heard that Kenny, who is from the second and third season, he went on to do some director and other behind the scenes sort of stuff on movies.
Yeah, that's still really cool though.
I think it makes sense that only a couple of them went on to do entertainment type roles, and the others kind of, I mean, that's a very common thing in children's television with children actors, is they'll reach a certain point, they'll either do that one project or they'll do a couple of small projects, and then they'll say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to live a normal life now, and then that's it. So the fact that we haven't heard where most of these people are, that also doesn't surprise me, and it makes sense. Most of these people look like this was their only entertainment role that they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
So they did their fun thing as a kid, and they said, okay, I'm going to be an adult now, bye.
I completely agree and see that with many other kids, but another person I just thought of, Taylor from the last season, and she has a social media presence now, but then immediately after the 7th season, she was on the first season of Fetch, which we talked about earlier.
So the reboot of the show was developed in Boston. I'm trying to see if the original show doesn't say country of origin. Oh no, there it is. Production locations, Boston. Okay. So this is definitely something that, sorry, internet. This is something that was specifically developed in Boston. It was a specific region that this show was developed in, and continues in, I guess. So I guess if they were going to do a reboot, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I feel like Boston would be the one place to do it.
Yeah.
But is Boston a big filming location anymore? Do they do a lot of filming stuff there?
I mean, WGBH is the PBS station in Boston that produced Zoom, but they also produce a lot of programming for children and adults, usually for public television. Because Kate Taylor, her pet project was that reboot of Zoom in 1999. She worked on Arthur, in the early days, and then I think she left after 2000 to focus more heavily on Zoom.
And that would make sense if it was within that area that they were producing the same thing in.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot more physical activity in this show, and kids today are way more lazy, I don't know if that's going to be something that appeals to today's children's audience, which is real sad to say.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like as a kid, I loved watching other people like get up and dance and have fun on TV. Like I even remember like scrolling through the channels and seeing like Sit and Be Fit, and I'd be like, oh, I want to try that one day. And I ended up doing it one day, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And I would just get like, it didn't matter how people were dancing or how they were having fun. I just wanted to get up and dance. And that's something that I also don't see a lot of today.
You're right. There's a lot of segments on television series growing up that had, like you said, people dancing or people saying, they're even if it was just a hokey pokey, it's like, oh, I know this song, I got to do it with you. So I always jumped up and danced along to those segments on television as well. Now, to show how television can influence people, I want to touch real quickly on rocket power, because for those that don't know, I am not a very physical person, and I have never had a desire to do anything sports related. I was always terrible. And then rocket power came on, and I said, oh my goodness, I have got to learn how to skateboard. So I went out and bought a skateboard, and I failed miserably, but it gauged my interest enough to make me want to go and buy a skateboard, to do all these physical activities that they were doing on this cartoon that may or may not actually be things that you can do in real life. I am not a sports person, so I'm not really sure. Maybe they're cartoon sports. But television has a huge impact on that. And I'm not sure if it's going to be, if they brought a show like this back, if it would be too jarring to kids now, because there was no like transition back into something like that.
Yeah, because it's so absent. Yeah, it's so absent. Yeah. I was gonna say it's so absent from TV nowadays. It's like if someone brought it back, what are kids now gonna think? Are they gonna want to do this as well? Are they gonna say, oh well, I've never heard of that, I don't know if I should try it? Like, yeah, I don't know either. It's just interesting to me.
I appreciate that the show sticks to education, physical activity, and all of that stuff, because then you get, and talking like normal people versus a lot of these television, especially these animated shows that are all about like the fart jokes and like some of these DreamWorks shows. And I'm just like, can we not just,
can you not just stop?
Write a plot that focuses on anything but like gross bodily functions? That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm like putting myself in these kids' shoes, and I'm just trying to understand like what it is that's so interesting about those things, and I don't get it.
Yeah, what is the appeal about these shows and the material that they're presenting? I don't know. I can't figure it out either. But I will say, from the experience that I've had with doing a lot of library programming, we just did a program over the weekend. We did an adaptation of Frankenstein, like real little aimed adaptation. A teddy bear comes to life. And at the end of all of our library, most of our library programs, we have the kids do some sort of a craft activity. And I tell you right now, these kids get so excited about doing a craft. So maybe there is some interest still. And I think hitting them at that younger age is going to be the best way to get them engaged and involved in doing that kind of stuff. They love taking things home with them from these programs. They love being able to work on them and interact with us in person while we're there. So then, maybe there is hope.
Yeah, get them started young.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the key.
I realized that like most of this talk was not actually about this television.
Yeah.
But more so the concept of what this show was.
Yeah, but it leads into the show, which is, something that is kind of related to the show.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, if anything, it's sort of a teaser of like what's to come, like what we can cover as we talk about more of children's media and these TV shows and things like that.
Yeah, very true. Like, this is a test episode. It's not supposed to be perfect, but at least we're trying to stay on topic.
Oh, absolutely. I just I'm skimming through some clips of this show while we're talking, and I just stopped on this like ridiculous math problem, and I have no context as to what's going on, but there's like addition and then division and then subtraction and subtraction and subtraction and then number one. And I'm like, I don't understand what this math is and why we're doing it. How are we splitting this? What is this? Why is this here? Hi. But the math is there, and they're teaching each other. I like that there's no adults in the show. That's also something you don't really see anymore. Or if you do see adults in a show, they're really, really stupid. There's this trend on Nickelodeon and Disney Channel that the adults are written to be dumb. And I'm like, I make fun of my parents for being, derpy sometimes. Like, oh, how did you not know this information? But also, they're not brain dead, so I'm not really sure why that's the funny thing that's happening now.
But I do like the fact that it's written by kids for kids, and I think that's totally missing once again from children's media nowadays.
I love how much drawing there is in this show too. Everything's done digitally. So there's so much tactileness about Zoom.
And the overall design is just appealing. Like, even when I flip through, like I said, the channels or just through the commercials and I would see it, I'd be like, I'm so interested in watching that show. I don't know why I never watched it. I kind of regret it.
Oh my God. Now I'm seeing stuff that we played in like recess, like this Foursquare bouncy ball game. I think that's what it was called, Foursquare?
Yeah.
Okay. No, everyone wants to play. Oh, man. No, we've got to update this show. Let me tell you why this girl's in overalls, and overalls are making a comeback, and I don't know why, and it makes me so angry.
It makes me angry, too.
Every time I'm walking through a theme park and I see, like, a child with overalls on, I'm like, please stop. Please go away. Here, let me take you to Walmart or Target, and we're going to get you a T-shirt. Like, and jeans. We're going to get you 2 pairs of clothing.
Yeah, please leave those in the 90s. I don't think they need to make a comeback. I remember wearing them as a kid, and I never liked them. No.
Now we're in Chinatown. Where are we? What is this? I'm continuing to skim through episodes to see what's going on.
Oh, okay.
I'm not just randomly shouting things. I
figured I was wondering what the context was. Yeah. No, it's great though. This is great.
Maybe it was a Zoom guest, or like, because then on one segment they have sometimes they have a video snippet sent in from like someone's life.
That might be what this is.
Yeah, like I know there was one episode where they had someone send in a video about her life with diabetes. I think it was this kind that she was, when you were born, diabetic, and it was just showing like what it was like to live with diabetes and all that you can still live a normal life.
That's cool that they'll talk about serious topics too. I'm noticing that it's very hit or miss, and I think it was very hit or miss back in the 70s, 80s, 90s up until today, is you get some shows that like gently massage that message in without it seeming, today's topic is going to be this. Mr. Rogers really did a great job with that. I think Sherry Lewis did a great job with massaging some of those topics in. But then you see shows today, some of them, like, Arthur does a really good job with it, obviously. Girl Meets World was the one that really took me by surprise, because they, especially with autism, they really took what was great about the original series and then brought it to a new generation, and then said, okay, but what are the topics of focus that are popular today, or some of the issues that are happening today, or some of the challenges that people have. And autism has grown significantly over the last 20 years in awareness, so that's something that they needed to address in the series, and I thought that was really cool that they were able to address that. Whereas I think in the late 90s, diabetes was something that was really becoming popular and awareness. I don't know if popular is the right word for diabetes. It was
increasing awareness.
Aware in the public eye. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like how on Sesame Street. I'm not sure if you guys have known this, but they introduced that autistic character, that autistic puppet. I think her name's Julia. Yeah, it's just to see that.
Julia.
Like, yeah, when I first saw her, I mean, I honestly cried because that was something I was missing as a kid. When I was a kid, I didn't I couldn't look up to anyone because there wasn't, we didn't know like how autism worked or how it affected people, and we still don't really know. But to see that kind of representation now, it's definitely making progress. It made me smile, and I think that's something good about shows that represent different things like diabetes or autism or any other like mental disorder or stuff like that. To see it being represented now and making progress is something that I always love seeing.
Well, the representation is important for a variety of reasons. One, we need to be inclusive of anyone, no matter what their circumstances are. But then there's also, with Julia, what's great is it's teaching children and adults, autism has this wide spectrum, obviously, and everyone's autism is slightly different. But it's teaching these children and adults that may not understand what's going on, kind of what's going on, and then being able to gauge the situation based on how a person is acting or speaking and go, okay, so this is not this person being mean, or this person's not ignoring me, or this person's, not angry or upset with me. Like, this is part of their person. And it kind of, especially with how they introduced her to Big Bird, I think that was a huge step forward in educating people about how autism affects people and how to interact with somebody that has autism. Especially with how wide the spectrum is, because you really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, like when I saw Julia, I just saw myself because I was almost exactly like her as a kid. And it's just, of course it affects everyone differently. And yeah, it's just, I can't put it into words, but, you mark progress too. And to see like yourself in another person and relate to that, that's what really hit me. And as a kid, I just wished that I saw imagine, that. Yeah. Yeah. But it's just to have a relatable character, even though it affects all of us differently, to have a character like that, and to have it so relatable is what actually blew my mind a little bit, because it's such a complicated disorder, but it was represented in almost nearly perfect way. I mean, you can't really represent it in a perfect way because, of course, it's a spectrum, but to see that, it was awesome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, to sort of bring it back to the subject at hand with Zoom.
Sorry, getting off track again.
It's fine. I guess one segment of sorts that I don't know if you've seen. I don't think it was in any of the episodes I had previously linked to go over, but there was a secret language that was spoken frequently on Zoom called Ubby.
Oh, I did actually look into that a little bit.
Yeah, and with Ubby, the way you speak it is you put an ub before every vowel sound. And I guess I ended up teaching myself at a very young age how to speak Ubby, and now like I can speak Ubby without like really any thought as to where the ub goes. For instance, the bisibis ribikabo, eberebic, eben pibijibe, eben libis papat kabastibis, bibiyaban double. And I just said this is Rico, Eric, and PJ, and this podcast is Beyond the Lens.
That is amazing. Like, I kept hearing it over and over again. Like, when I watched the video, I'm like, I can't figure it out. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I am untalented in that retrospect.
Same.
I have zero talents when it comes to stuff like that. So I am more power to you, Rico, for being able to pull that off.
Yeah.
Hats off to you.
I mean, I could put a hat on and take it off, but nobody would notice. So, oh, there are a lot more like video segments in this show than I realized, because I'm like, all of a sudden now we're at a circus. I think that's great though, because then it shows. I like that there's like travel. Oh, now we're cooking. What are we cooking? I can't see because the PBS logo is on top of it. I think we're making cupcakes. We were making cupcakes, and then all of a sudden we're off the circus. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, the variety of segments that they did was great. There was like, I think they had a different one per season or something like that. I looked at the little list and I'm like, huh, that's really interesting. Because it's like, what if somebody really liked a segment but it didn't show up next season? You're like, ah. Yeah, I don't know. I saw this one segment. I don't remember what it was. But it was on one season. I'm like, oh, I wonder why they didn't do it for more. Like, was it not popular? Did it not fit with the show? I was always wondering about that.
Like, what segment do you notice was missing?
Book reviews, I guess they only ran from seasons 3 to 5, and I was wondering, oh, why did it only last 2 seasons, or why did they bring it in like midway through the entire series? Because I thought that was an interesting segment.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why is they wanted to make room for like different kinds of segments, and so like they can only have so much. And another thing is, starting with season 4, they downsized the number of shows to produce each season from 40 to 20. And so obviously there's only so much you can put into a season.
Got it.
You guys, I just found this kid on a dirt bike, and it says Davy from St. Cloud, Florida, and I have never seen a more Florida thing than a kid dirt biking. Oh my God. I want to know if this guy still lives here and if he's related to anybody that I know. I must find out. If I do find him, we're going to feature him on a separate episode. Can you explain? This has nothing to do with this TV show other than you sent in a video, but I need to know if you're still doing this, like, jumping over dirt with a bike. Yes.
That reminds me, like, a Zoom guest segment that aired in the first season, I believe, actually happened to be a singer who was touring and actually ended up becoming famous later on. Happened to be Aaron Carter. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I'm afraid I'm not familiar.
Hang on. Say that whole thing again.
And there was
I know who Aaron Carter is, yes.
Yeah, so there was a Zoom guest segment showing what it was like to be like a touring musician and a singer, a pop star of sorts, and happened to be by Aaron Carter.
How old was he at that point? He was...
No,
I guess he was...
just starting out. It wouldn't be...
I was going to say, I mean, because I remember the Aaron's Party song came out when I was in 4th grade because we played that CD all the time in class. So that was 2000. So, I mean, I guess he was peaking to his popularity. That's interesting that was the person they chose. Personally, I'm more of a Jesse McCartney person if I'm picking blonde pop singer celebrities.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know.
I mean, I could go on about Jesse McCartney because that was like my era sort of thing. I think I was pretty young still, even when Jesse McCartney was a thing. So, yeah.
I mean, he's still going. His tour. What I like about Jesse McCartney is that he's popular enough to tour still, but not quite popular enough to charge $3 million for tour tickets. The last time I saw him was about 5 years ago, and his tickets were $30. He's about to go on tour again, and his tickets are $30. you pay more if you want like the VIP experience, but like even still, that's $150, which is like nothing for a concert if you're getting like a meet and greet and backstage passes and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, jumping back to Zoom, were there any other random celebrity guest appearances that happened on that show, or was it just like that was like a really random one?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious now.
Yeah, I honestly don't know any off the top of my head.
IMDb says more shows like Zoom include Zoboomafoo, Zoom from the 70s, Out of the Box, Bear in the Big Blue House, PB&J Otter, and Between the Lions. I see the reason why all 6 of those are on that list. One episode. Who was on here? Connor Flynn, Maya Morales. Yep, Aaron Carter's the only, like, celebrity type person that's appeared on the show.
Yeah.
According to the IMDb. That's so random.
Yeah.
Good for you, Aaron Carter. Good for you.
Another thing that I thought of as you were talking about earlier, like, none of the kids that were on the show, like, sort of grew up to, like, being, like, famous or stars or anything like that. I know in the 70s version, like, if you made it onto the show, you had to sign a contract saying that you would not appear anywhere else on TV or in movies or anything like that for 3 years after leaving the show.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why is they didn't want Zoom to be sort of a catapult into like being a child actor or things like that.
I mean, I can kind of see their point, but also, if the show is still going and these people become more popular, they go, "Where did you get your first role?" And they say, "Oh, well, I was on Zoom. Go watch that show. It's so much fun." But I guess you can't really know if they're actually going to say that or not, or if they're going to be like, "Yeah, I acted. I did things." You can get the entire 70s series on DVD. I'm not sure who asked for that, but there it is.
I'm not sure if it's the entire 70s series. I think it's a 2-disc set. One was just a transfer of a VHS tape that was released in the 90s sort of to promote the upcoming reboot of the show, but it had like all the clips from the 70s, and then at the end they tagged on, "Hey, Zoom's coming back. Here's some of the segments we've produced so far." And
okay.
And then on the second disc, it just had 4 hand-picked episodes from the 70s. From different seasons.
That makes more sense. All right. Any final thoughts that you have on Zoom?
I mean, I don't know if it'll ever be rebooted again, but if it does happen, I'd be all for it. I mean, it was definitely a show that I think if I watched, I would definitely miss. I actually kind of do miss it, even though I didn't really watch it. I feel like it should make a comeback.
Yeah.
I am interested to see if somebody, probably me, because I'll get bored at some point and be like, "Oh, I wonder what I can look from this," can adapt some of the segments into even if it's not a Zoom reboot, but take some of those segments and bring them into a new television series. And it doesn't matter what it is. Go ahead.
So essentially it would be something like create a version of Shining Time Station, except instead of Thomas stories, it's the Zoom segments.
That could work. Yeah, that would be something interesting. I think that was just so much of what PBS was back in the 90s, was a lot of these little segments that were put together, I think, with an overarching storyline or plot line. I think that would work really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it works with Puzzle Place, it works with Between the Lions, it works with Mr. Rogers had segments like this, so it's definitely a format that's been proven to work. I'm just hoping that it would work in this time period.
Yeah. Yes, I would all be for a reboot of Zoom 2. I would also be interested if there, even if it was just a handful of episodes of the 70s, if they had something similar out on DVD of the 1999 version, even if it would just be a way to like say, hey, maybe we could see if there's interest in bringing it back.
Yeah, I'm always interested to see what studios and executives think about these types of things. And I'd love to see almost like a test audience view the show now and see what they do react well to without updating it, and then see, okay, they reacted well to this, what can we do with this specific thing?
I like that idea.
Yeah.
But I'm not a studio executive, so nobody will listen to me. I just like to throw things out into the world and hope that somebody listens.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I actually think that they should do that, even if it's just experimental.
Yeah.
This has been a very interesting discussion.
I think from my perspective, it was interesting to learn more about a show that I only vaguely knew of as a kid. So this was something more eye-opening, and I'm more interested in learning more about this show now that we've discussed everything about it.
Yeah,
I completely agree. I can't believe I never watched this show, and I used to see it all the time. And again, I regret it because it seemed like an amazing program.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that just about wraps up this episode. So, till next time, this has been A Journey Beyond the Lens. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's W-E-R-Q by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Recore Entertainment production.
Now I've got Arthur popping up. Like, no, I didn't ask for you, Arthur. Go back to your aardvark family. It's not what I'm asking for right now.